Hey, everybody. Today we're going to talk about poverty, equal employment, and comparable worth. This is from our chapter 7.1.2, pages 168 through 171. Let's start off by looking at poverty. So, the Bureau of the Census, or the Census Bureau, reports that 13 to 15% of Americans live in poverty each year. This group faces inadequate housing, clothing and food shortages, and often they reside in the urban slums or rural areas. Well, what does this have to do with business? Why is it important that we know this information? Well, let's take a little look here. So, with poverty, wealth inequity is growing, with the richest 20% seeing continuous income growth, while the lowest 8% experience a decline. And the gap between the wealthy and the rest of the population is widening. However, Social Security has reduced poverty in the elderly, but many children live in impoverished conditions due to parental education and job skill limitations. Increased education is key to boosting income. But the government, it does provide programs like minimum wage. So the minimum wage here in Indiana is $7.25 an hour. They also offer unemployment benefits. So people who are fired or can't currently find work after quitting a job, they can apply for unemployment benefits, which gives them a little bit of money per week to live on until they're able to find a job. But there are different criteria that kind of go into that. And then there's also job training. So the government can provide job training. We have some really great programs here in town. The Work One is one that a lot of people will go to gain some like simple on the job experience, or maybe gain some certification so that they can be hired on as well. And especially with unemployment benefits, sometimes people have to look at and apply for a certain amount of jobs per week in order to continue to get those unemployment benefits. But the government does provide programs like that for people who may be in poverty or just can't find work. So it does exist to help support the economically disadvantaged, which of course is our people that live in poverty. But what does this have to do with business, right? Why is it important that we know this information? Well, this is to tell you that when you're working with people and you have employees who are working under you, it's important that you're continuing to uh, feed their desire to learn more, to be able to add to their skill set, to provide training for them. In addition to that, it's important to know that if we have people who are working for us that are falling under the poverty line, they're going to experience a lot more difficulties in their life that may cause them to not come to work, maybe be absent more often, possibly sick more often. Of course, they can't afford childcare or sometimes even food. So maybe they're going to come to work and they don't have lunch. Well, think about Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? That first and most simple bottom of the triangle was what? Your physiological needs: food, shelter, water, and clothing. And if somebody doesn't have those basic needs, they're not going to be motivated or work well for you. So that's why it's important that we know about poverty in the United States and what we're really looking at. Our next area that we're going to take a look at is equal employment. Despite laws prohibiting discrimination based on various factors, some Americans face challenges in job access and advancement. So, the glass ceiling is something that I'm sure some of us ladies in the room are aware of. But the glass ceiling is a concept that represents an unseen barrier that hinders certain groups from reaching higher positions. Back in the 1970s, the glass ceiling was talked about a lot in terms of female advancement in the workforce. I mean, even now we're not receiving the same amount of pay as men are. And that's what that glass ceiling is, that some people have a harder time getting into positions because of their gender or their race or maybe even a disability. And so the government has set up some regulations to help prevent that from happening, but sometimes it still occurs. The next one for equal employment means equal employment opportunities are legally mandated. So, like I said, the government has put into place some things to help prevent people from having that glass ceiling, but unfortunately, it still happens. All right. Women, like I said before, and racial minorities are often stuck in low paying entry level roles, and that's known as the sticky floor syndrome. So think about like not being able to move, right? You're kind of stuck in the position that you're in, um, and you're not able to advance. So maybe you have a woman that really wants to be CEO, but she can't seem to break through that barrier because there are men in higher roles that don't think that she's capable. So she kind of gets stuck in that sticky floor syndrome. Advancement opportunities improve, though, when you have a higher education, and there might be some redesigns to the job. So maybe more women kind of get into positions of power, or people of color get into positions of power. So that opens up more opportunities for others to kind of get out of that sticky floor syndrome. And why does this matter to us as we think about the future and the business? Well, sometimes you kind of have to be a little realistic, right? Unfortunately, issues like this still happen. But if you're being a manager, you have to realize that the government has these regulations that are supposed to prevent us from being discriminative against people that work for us, that we should give everybody equal opportunity in employment to be able to take on leadership positions and to fulfill other positions within the company. The next one is comparable worth. So this kind of goes along with what we were just talking about. But studies highlight the wage gap between men and women. So it is closing. Okay. So yes, women still historically make less than men, but that gap is closing. So, comparable worth essentially aims to ensure equal pay for jobs with similar skill levels and responsibilities. So, let's say you have two secretaries. You have a male secretary and a female secretary, and they do the exact same job. They should be being paid the exact same amount. So the man shouldn't be getting an extra dollar more because he's a man. They should be paid the same for the same skill set. You have a male doctor and a female doctor, and they're both heart surgeons. And let's say that they went to the same school and they have the same certifications. Well, they should be paid the same because they have the exact same skill set. In addition to that, when you're thinking about comparable worth, you need to think about and analyze factors like, do they have the skill set? Are they physically capable of completing the work? What's the risk if you were to pay them the same, right? What's their education? Those are all things that you should take a look at. So let's say you have two secretaries again, a male and a female secretary. But let's say the man didn't go to college. He only has a high school degree. But the female went to college, and maybe she has a master's degree in, let's say, business administration. That would allow that female to be paid more than that man because her education is higher and she has a higher skill set than him because of her education, right? So then at that point, the comparable worth is not equal because the female has a higher skill set. So it does help to determine fair compensation in the job force. So like as a teacher, I just have a bachelor's degree. And so my starting wage, let's just say, is $50,000, but maybe somebody who has a master's in teaching, they would automatically be paid more. So let's say they're getting paid $55,000. I can't be mad about that because they have a higher education than I do, right? So it helps determine that fair compensation. Lastly, for comparable worth, implementing comparable worth plans can be complex due to subjective criteria and varying job markets. Some states, though, have laws promoting pay equity in the public sector roles. So, regardless of your skill set, and if you have a higher education, they're saying it shouldn't matter that if you're working in a public sector role, that you should get paid the same amount as anybody else. So that's just kind of something to think about. I want to spend some time looking at this example. This is Misty Copeland. Misty is an American ballet dancer for the American Ballet Theater, one of the three leading classical ballet companies in the United States, the American Ballet Theater. And on June 30th of 2015, Misty Copeland, who is African American and a female, she was the first African American woman to be promoted to principal dancer in the American Ballet Theater's 75-year history. That might not mean anything to you, but this was a huge monumental event. Okay. Typically, African American women were seen as not being the correct physical form to be a prima ballerina or the lead ballet dancer for any company. Okay. And Misty and Copeland really got out of that sticky floor syndrome, and she broke that glass ceiling in the ballet world. So we're going to take some time to watch her video. And when we are done, you can go ahead and put your stuff away for the day. So thank you for listening.